I have been doing my best to keep you updated as to what's happening in South Africa. Mommy Africa, I've told you that the government there is black now and is controlled by the ANC, a radical, evil socialist group that was at one point headed up by Nelson Mandela. And now that the government is black, they are going after white South Africans and they're taking the farmland without compensation. And you don't hear a lot about it internationally because it's happening to white people. That's why. And white people are the most hated people on this side of heaven because the people of color are jealous of them and they're hated. I have with me Willem Petzer. And Willem is a South African Boer, which is to say a white South African, and an independent reporter on YouTube. And he's been talking about this situation in South Africa. Willem, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, JC. It's an honor to be on your show.
Yes, sir. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I want you to tell the folks exactly what's happening there with the white farmers.
Well, it's actually quite bad news for us. The last week, the first two farms have been expropriated, or the state has tried to expropriate them without compensation. So what happened was the state told the farmer he had 5 days to get off the farm and give his keys to the farm, to the state, and hand over his keys. And then the farmer got a court order, a restraining order against the state. So the restraining order at the court against the state now still stands, but the state is prepared to fight to take the farm without compensation. And the first two.
And is this being widely reported in South Africa? Are the people aware exactly what's going on?
Yeah, it's very widely reported in South Africa by our mainstream news. Our mainstream news called News 24 actually told us, oh, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen over and over and over again. And we have this one group here, AfriForum, they told us, listen, this is the list, it's going to happen. And they released a list of farms of who the state are going to expropriate without compensation. So the mainstream news always told us it's not going to happen. AfriForum is lying to us. And then just a week ago, the first two farms were expropriated. And the first two farms are actually also the first two farms on the list that was released.
And that was the list that we reported on this end as well. What caused you to begin reporting on what's going on there?
I felt it as a part of my calling. I'm studying theology right now, and I'm still a student at theology. So I just felt part of my calling would be to spread the message, and I'm doing this videos part time on the side while studying.
According to News Corp Australia, a record 400 farmers were attacked in 2017, between 1 to 2 killed every week. Is that true?
Yeah, that's the official police statistics that we have. About 2 farmers are attacked per day and about 2 are killed per week. The statistics that we have at AfriForum says that there were 438 farm attacks in total last year.
What I would like to know, why did white South Africans allow it to get to this point before they start fighting back?
Well, I would say the biggest problem that we had was massive propaganda against us by the communists, and the fact that the Afrikaner is an extremely religious people. And the churches basically started to incorporate this communist propaganda in their sermons in the 70s and more so in the 80s. We had this one guy in our biggest church here called the Dutch Reformed Church. His name was Johan Heinz, and he was basically a communist propagandist, and he worked his way up to become the moderator of the Dutch Reformed Church.
And so when I report that the government is predominantly black now, right? And it's controlled by the ANC. Is that true?
Yeah, the ANC controls almost 60%, and then the EFF, which is basically a more radical version of the ANC controls about another 7%. And the thing that we see here is the EFF, who control 7%, are actually the ones making the policies, because the EFF push for a policy, and then a few years later, that's the ANC's official policy, and that's been happening every time.
That's amazing. I read that the farmers' lives are at risk, and that there are blacks who are going out to the farmlands and they're robbing and stealing and killing, and nothing is being done about that. Is that true?
Yeah, I wouldn't say nothing's being done about it. Of course, the normal crime procedure is done against them, but the problem that we have is that it's not being treated as a special problem, because it's a very big problem. It happens all the time, and actually a good friend of mine, his name is Ernst Roets, he recently wrote a book that he did a lot of research for, in which he proved government complicity in these farm attacks.
And I also read that a lot of, many of the whites who are being killed don't believe that this is racial, that is happening because of their race, that they're white, and so they're not armed and they're not protecting themselves. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say the older generation, in their minds, they still live in the old South Africa. So in their minds, they are still safe and everything. But I would say the younger generation is a lot more aware of what's going on around them, and they arm themselves to the teeth, basically.
Have this attack or these attacks affected your family in any way so far?
Yeah, my great aunt and great uncle were actually murdered in such a farm attack. They were tortured for about 6 hours, and then the farm attacker took their blood and he wrote on the walls messages like 666 and White Devil and so forth.
That's amazing, man. And so what's going to happen? How's this whole thing going to end?
Well, I don't know. All we can do is prepare for the worst and pray that the worst doesn't happen.
Amazing. And so is it true that some white farmers are stuck there because, they're poor, they can't afford to leave? And I don't know what to ask you. Tell us, what should we be doing to help you guys over there?
Of course, I think, especially now, it's not possible for farmers to leave anymore, because they won't be able to sell their farms in the situation that the country is in, because the farms are now basically useless or worthless to people, because nobody would want to buy it in a country where the state explicitly said that they are going to take it away without compensation. So these farmers aren't able to sell their farms anymore, and that's a bit of a problem. As if you say, what can you guys do to help that side? One thing that I have realized that's really been helping a lot is if different churches start to connect amongst each other and to South Africa, where the people come together and pray, and they lobby for the government to do something. I know in Australia this has worked extremely well. And the reason for that would be because there are quite a lot of expats in Australia from South Africa who are pushing this story quite a lot in Australia. So that helped with Australia, and that has even got the government of New South Wales to sign a petition. I've got it on my Twitter page, or not a petition, I forgot what you call that in English. But let me just find it on my Twitter page here.
I know that Australia has taken a lot of the white South Africans in. Are there some who are trying to come here to the United States?
I know of a few, but not many, not as many as Australia. I would say the most expats in South Africa, or South African expats, do live in Australia now. We have about 1 million expats, or South Africa has about 1 million expats, 1 million white expats, of which by far the largest part live in Australia, because a lot of people has already left the country. Okay, so they passed a motion in Australia, and the motion that was passed reads as follows. New South Wales Legislative Council, the House notes Articles 2 and 3 of the Convention of Prevention of Punishment of the Crime of Genocide that this House strongly condemns any calls of killing, marginalization, persecution, victimization, and targeting of any racial group in the Republic of South Africa by its officials, past and present, especially as we've seen in the case of white South Africans, and any law that unjustly expropriates lands from any individual without fair, just, and equitable compensation put and passed. So that's quite a victory for us, having the first foreign government condemn the actions of the South African Communist government.
That's right. Have you been trying to get other countries, such as the United States, and to condemn what's happening there?
Yeah, well, I think we've been trying quite hard, especially since a few months ago, the CEO and vice CEO of AfriForum went to the United States. They've actually met up with quite a lot of people, such as Senator Ted Cruz and John Bolton, and they've been on Tucker Carlson's show, and they met with think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation and the Cater Institute, and they spread the information on what's happening here. So we hope to hear back from these people soon.
You know, if this was the other way around, if this were a white government saying to black people, we're going to take your land without compensation, it would be all that the world would be talking about every day. But because it's happening to whites and no one seemed to care because it is happening to whites, well, not no one, but a whole lot of folks don't care. What does that feel like, knowing that the world don't care because it's happening to white people?
Well, I wouldn't say it feels too wonderful, but the thing is, we are just doing our best this side to be ready for whatever happens. And if the world can support us, it would be a bonus. But I would say just the best thing for the world to do is or something that the world can not do, which would be great, which would be to intervene and support the communist government like they did in the past, because I think it's completely immoral that the West supported the communist government above the capitalist government that there was.
Yeah.
Because they knew what the communists and their agenda was, and they still supported them. But I think this is because of massive social justice propaganda, especially coming from Sweden, but also in the United States.
Will you and your family stay and see it through, or at some point will you leave?
Well, I would say my family, and especially myself, would definitely stay and see it through before I would leave, because this is where my people are, and my people can't all leave. So even though I might be in the fortunate position to leave, I would rather stay and help and fight for my own people.
Are the whites there getting any support from any blacks there? Are there blacks who are supporting the whites?
Yeah, there's a very small minority. For example, a politician named Tero Lakota is supporting the whites, but the problem is that these blacks are very, very unpopular with all the other black people. Yeah. So they get harassed quite badly by the majority of the black people. So even though they might come out and support white people, they don't want to, because they know that could cost them their life. I mean, I don't know if you know what a necklace is, but it actually happened a few days ago. The last time it happened was just a few days ago. So the black people are still very, very scared.
So a necklace is when they put a tire around your neck and they set it on fire. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so they basically burn you to death. But the difference is, if you're burnt at the stake, you usually die of the carbon monoxide poisoning long before you die of the temperature and the burn. So the reason they use the tire and put it around your neck and set it on fire is so that you can run around and breathe in fresh air while you burn to death. So it's a much slower, much more painful death than burning at the stake.
I remember Winnie Mandela, the ex-wife of Nelson Mandela, was accused of doing that at one time. I know that you've been debating a lot of folks there, and have you gotten threats or people waking up as a result of you putting the word out as to what's happening?
Yeah, I think I've got a lot of both positive and negative reaction. I get basically daily death threats from Black South Africans, especially on Twitter. But I don't really give a much thought to it because, I mean, if you go look at Twitter and you look at the South African situation and you look at the Black South Africans and the way they act on Twitter, is they basically threaten to kill almost every single one. So I think those threats are quite empty. But from my own people, I've got a lot of support. For example, my last video, I did a piece on one of the elites, a CEO, speaking out against, he said, white people, especially Afrikaners who believe they are God's chosen people. And I said, it's not right, you can't say something like that. And that video has got about, between YouTube and Facebook, of more than 100,000 views. And that has actually sparked a lot of attention from South Africa and from the people, and they are taking actions against the company. And all the mainstream media sources in South Africa reported on it after I did, but unfortunately they didn't name me. They wanted to keep me a secret, but they all reported on what happened.
What's your website? How can people read about or keep up with what you're reporting on?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter. That's where I do most of what I report, and then they can also follow my YouTube channel, and that's where I make my videos. If something really interesting happens, I would make a video about it.
One last thing I wanted to ask: is it true that there's a town in South Africa that is, I guess, predominantly white and it's crime-free, no crime at all? Orania, I believe.
Yeah, actually, Orania is a cultural town. They do not only allow whites; they only allow Afrikaners there. So many or most white people will also not be allowed there. So the concept of the town is that it's a town for just Afrikaners, just the ethnic group of Afrikaners. It's the cultural group, and they only allow Afrikaners there. So I made my first ever documentary about Orania. The documentary is called Crime Free Orania. And what happened was Lauren Southern actually came to South Africa, and she had a brief sentence in that documentary where she spoke about Orania, and she said it was completely crime-free. So our mainstream media freaked out about that and called her right-wing propagandist and said that it's not true what she's saying, but they never actually even investigated the crime rate of Orania. So I just thought I would fill that void, and that's why I went to Orania and made the documentary about it.
I had Lauren on the show. Well, I'm glad that you came on. Anytime you have anything to report on this, feel free to let us know and come on so we can keep up with what's happening there.
All right. Thank you very much, Jesse.
All right. I wish you guys well.